I'm Michael David, and you're watching Eye on Sun Valley's Roundtable. Issues in Focus.
Farmers Insurance, the Christensen Agency, Ketchum and Haley, protecting your future one asset at a time. 208-726-6046.
The issue? No matter what you call it, middle-income housing, community, affordable, or workforce housing, the lack of it is a crisis affecting communities like ours around the nation.
Well, I think the lack of workforce housing is an absolute problem here in Ketchum. I think I see these people coming in every year, people that are professionals, they've been through college, they want to create a life here, and a couple years down the line or 3 years down the line, I see them all moving out. And maybe that's just the nature of us being in a resort town, but I think at the same time, the lack of housing is absolutely an issue.
Workforce housing has always been difficult in resort communities, partly because the property is so expensive. The population fluctuates, but we still need that service industry to be able to be close to the community that they serve. It's something that helps our economy, but it's always a struggle to make sure that we have enough housing, and we still haven't done it sufficiently in this area.
Joining us to discuss, Doug Brown, Sun Valley Economic Development. Blaine County Commissioner Larry Schoen. Ketchum Community Development Corporation Chair Neil Bradshaw. And commercial and residential developer John Sofro. Gentlemen, plain and simple, we don't have enough housing in our community. Years of insufficient zoning regulations combined with rising housing costs outpacing stagnant incomes have put us behind the eight ball. Without enough affordable housing, we won't be able to retain and recruit business in our valley. Working families, working multiple jobs just to keep their head above the water isn't the solution. People overburdened by housing costs don't spend money locally, and the economy suffers on both sides of the counter. If people continue to leave due to a lack of affordable housing, our community will cease to exist as we know it. Commissioner Schoen, there's a lot of desperate, frustrated people out there in need of affordable housing. Some are choosing to try and stick it out, but many leave. In your estimation, how critical is this problem today?
Well, I think it's a problem that's critical for people on a personal level. I think it's a problem that's critical at the business and economic level. One of the biggest obstacles businesses have to either expand or simply just to be profitable and successful, to fulfill their mission as a business is to have the employees they need and to be able to keep them, to hire new employees, sometimes with special skills from out of the area. If you offer somebody a job and they move to this community and they find that they're not able to get into a housing situation that is affordable for them and sustainable for them financially, they're not going to stay. So it's a problem for those who are here, who are struggling to make the payments on higher priced homes, and it's a problem for people who are thinking about moving here or who have moved here and are still looking.
Yeah, and Blaine County School District, our biggest employer, is experiencing difficulties recruiting and retaining quality teachers. Right. And the future is bleak as almost half of their staff retires in the near future. So it's not going to get better. Doug, representing Sun Valley Economic Development, tell us how the middle-income housing shortage from an economic standpoint affects our community.
You bet, Michael. Thank you. I think this is a great concept, by the way, to have this group here tonight. It's fed. We got wind of all this at a kind of a critical level last year when we went out and we just talked to so many people, probably over 150 people had coffee with, and we wanted to get their input on what was going on. And we talked to a lot of our business members. We are primarily a business nonprofit. Sure. And the message coming back was very strong, is that they foresaw that this was going to be ever more critical because no middle-income housing is being built. So while we have a problem today, what about tomorrow and the next year after that? It's like it's going to get worse. So as a business, You can't grow if you can't add good people, because I think people after the recession are very productive with the staff that they have out of necessity. So now for them to grow, they need people. And as Commissioner Schoen pointed out, there's not the housing available for people to come from out of the area. So we're stuck on expansion. And we're also stuck on bringing new businesses here to relocate, because those people will need to have a place to live. So that will contract our economy over time if we don't provide the necessary housing.
This is serious. Organizations such as Arch and the Housing Authority and KCDC were created in Blaine County with a purpose to develop and manage and create affordable housing. Studies have been done that show literally hundreds of units are needed to kind of meet that demand. Neil Bradshaw, as chair of KCDC, one of those organizations, what do you think, how much housing do we need to make a difference?
Well, let's start off with the personal side. We can get caught up in stats and we can get caught up in what we could and couldn't be doing. But let's bring it down to personal issues. Well, let's talk about one business that I met. They'd hired a new employee. The employee started, worked for 2 or 3 weeks, couldn't find permanent housing, and left the area, and then went down actually to Arizona where they could find better housing. That's a long way away. Let's look at another situation where we saw a young woman who's looking for long-term rental housing, sees an ad in the paper. There's one in the whole ad on the Wednesday paper. She goes at 6 in the morning, and she's joined by a line of 15 other people waiting in line for that thing.
Right.
So, I mean, we can get, I really want to bring it to a personal level, because everything is about that extra person that we can keep in this town. Social, cultural, and economic vibrancy comes from people, keeping people in town every day. And so my whole view and the view of many in the community is to just take action one step at a time. Every single house we put on the market for long-term rentals and for middle-income employees is another win. So as far as the Ketchum Community Development Corp is concerned, we had one really big win with Northwood Place, and we had a tremendous example of channeling federal funds.
And we'll get to hold that, because we will get to Northwood Place in a little bit. But I think, as we all understand, the people are the most important thing. But what I'm looking for is strategies to actually move the needle. John, do you have any, from a private sector standpoint, do you have any thoughts on kind of what is needed to make a difference to actually move the needle?
You know me well enough to know that I have lots of thoughts on this subject. There is no question that, yes, we can all tell stories about people we know that are experiencing this issue right now. The interesting thing is, this is not a new problem for us. It's been going on for many, many years, but it has reached truly a critical point right now. It's the worst that it's ever been. I look at the newspaper, the for rent ads every week, and in a city the size of Haley and Bellevue, which combined is 8,000-9,000 people, there are 4 rentals in the paper.
Sure.
So, as was pointed out earlier, there has been virtually no new construction happening of middle-income housing. There are a number of factors why that is. Part of it is, well, the bottom line is the ability to build something as a developer and make a return on your investment just doesn't exist today, given land costs and the underlying zoning, cost of construction, and obviously if we're trying to keep rents down, that doesn't really work well with the other 2 things.
Sure, and that's a perfect transition to where we'll go after the break. We've kind of laid out the issue of the problem and where we need to go, and we're going to take a break and for a word with our sponsors. And when we return, we'll start to talk a little bit about the obstacles that we face and hopefully some of the solutions that we can come up with.
Eye on Sun Valley's Roundtable is sponsored by the law firm of Stephen D. Thompson, attorney at law. Personal practical representation. 120 East Avenue, Ketchum. Call us 208-726-4518. And Accord Capital Management, your conscious portfolio. Mark W. George, 877-726-5594. mgeorge@accordcapitalmanagement.com.
Atkinson's Markets, better food, better price, better service.
You know, the past attempts have had a lot of roadblocks in creating affordable housing, but I do believe that while we've been discussing affordable housing since 1969 in the city, the current day situation has become quite a dilemma for businesses to succeed. And I can only speak to my will. I have the will to see it forward, but the council is the one who makes the vote. Currently, we're undergoing a RFP, a request for proposals for an affordable housing and public parking structure on the parking lot at Leadville and 6th Street. That will have affordable housing and public parking. We're hoping to bring that RFP towards the council in August, early August. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be neighbors that don't like it, but the reality is that the community is in a dire situation and we have to move forward. So like I said, I can only speak to my will, and I will do everything in my effort to move it forward.
I'm Michael David, and you're watching Eye on Sun Valley's Roundtable, Issues in Focus. We've laid out the issue of affordable housing, where we are and where we need to be. Let's talk about obstacles that we face. Existing regulations hamper at times the ability to create affordable housing in our cities and in the county. For example, property near St. Luke's has long been targeted as prime real estate for middle-income housing. Commissioner, how can the county address water and sewer issues that present obstacles to getting housing created?
Well, let me just back up a little bit. I want to talk about, you said regulations are an obstacle. Really, the county, going back many years, I would say maybe 20 years, almost 20 years, has tried to find solutions within the statutory framework in which we operate as a government agency. The Idaho legislature is very restrictive about what we can do. At one time when this place was growing rapidly, many of the local jurisdictions, the county included, passed ordinances that allowed for it was called inclusionary zoning. So if you were building a new subdivision, a portion of that subdivision would be workforce housing under the county's workforce housing program, and that was ruled inappropriate under Idaho law. Went through the courts. So we've turned to other solutions. And by the way, the theory of that was the more people that live here, the more construction that occurs, the more business activity, the greater the demand for affordable housing, whatever you want to call it, middle income housing. And so we've turned to other solutions. In one of those solutions is the county passed an ordinance, I believe it was in 2004, creating an overlay district just south of Ketchum that allowed developers to create density beyond the zoning there. And with the increased density, you would also provide a workforce housing component. So you go above the R.4 zoning or the R1 zoning, whatever it happened to be in the particular district. It was a 2-mile square area. You could build much more densely, presumably increase or improve your profitability, but you must provide a workforce housing component to the development.
And I understand too that within good intentions, the regulations have been, and the community housing overlay is a great example. But times change, and sometimes with the best intention, those regulations can become somewhat hamper the ability to do it. So, I think, John, you may have something to say on this subject.
Well, I was actually involved in that development.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, what on the regulatory front do you think that could actually help make it more attractive to get housing developed?
Well, it may be a often overused word, but we talk about density and the ability to build more dwelling units in a smaller amount of land. So if you want to reduce the cost of development, then you need to reduce the cost of land. The more units you can build on an acre, obviously on a per unit basis, the cost of land goes down. So there, again, as I said earlier, there are a number of obstacles to accomplishing this, but what's so ironic about all of this is that most communities that are trying to deal with this problem have a lack of available land. We have the good fortune in our valley to have an abundance of available land. to put this kind of product, assuming that we can get all the pieces to line up. So we need greater density. We need to build smaller units. I think the traditional models for dwelling units is definitely changing. We're seeing that in more urban areas where the size of these units, whether it's single-family homes or townhomes or condominiums, is shrinking.
Right, right.
What we're finding out is that people today are actually gravitating more towards less than more.
Right, right, and we'll talk about that
Right.
maybe when we get to some solutions. But I think, Commissioner, what John has brought up brings up the water and sewer
Right,
issues.
absolutely.
So
I was just getting to that. I want to say that, and John points it out, there are many solutions to the issue. The question is, A, can it be done under Idaho's laws, under the statutes?
Sure.
And B, we created this district just south of, purposely just south of Ketchum and Sun Valley, close,
Right, right.
not within town. You can't force people to build a certain type of housing, but you can incentivize it. So with the increased density comes the need for a certain type of infrastructure. You can't, in Idaho, you can't build a septic system on less than 1 acre. So if you're going to have housing that's more dense than that, you have to provide a sewer system.
Right,
Two of the obstacles in this particular area, it's called the Gateway area, south of Ketchum and Sun Valley, around the hospital. Two of the obstacles there are the availability of water and sewer capacity.
Yeah.
So another way to incentivize the construction of middle income or workforce housing is to reduce the cost of building it, as has been pointed out. And so the county has contemplated and has begun investigating the possibility of being able to provide water and sewer to take that obstacle away.
Right, right.
So
And that's great. I think those are the kind of things we have to do. One of the obstacles that we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it is the not in my backyard NIMBYism. Neighbors will consistently oppose affordable housing projects, couching their opposition often in terms of worried about their declining property values, but I believe it's more, the roots are more in classism. I don't want those people living nearby me. Doug, it's been brought up, you're fully aware of communities across the nation that are implementing innovative housing alternatives such as micro apartments and tiny homes, and they're all wonderful ideas until the piece of land is identified and then the neighbors come out in opposition. Any thoughts on how we bridge that gap, educating the neighbors about the benefits of it, the fact that it will bring vitality in year-round residents?
Well, there's a couple of steps, Michael, in my view. I've been following an economical housing solutions project in the city of Haley since December, trying to build 24 micro units on River Street with the potential to build another 24 right next door.
Right.
And sure enough, the NIMBYs come out, and like they always do, and that's where a city council needs to get, or a commissioner, needs to get educated as to the benefits of it, maybe ahead of time, so that they can have an answer from constituents
Right.
who are calling them up saying, what are you doing? Well, if they're not educated and they don't understand totally how to communicate it, then that kind of makes the problem worse.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing is, they have to have courage to do the right thing
Sure.
for the big picture. And part of that is people like SVED, groups like SVED, showing up at the meetings, showing support for the city council or the commissioners,
Right.
and letting them know that the business community, which needs housing,
Sure.
right, for our economy,
Yeah.
that they're in support of these new ideas.
Yeah.
And a lot of older people sit on boards, councils, P&Zs, and they're not necessarily real familiar or enthusiastic about some of these
people
new
want.
concepts.
Sure. No, I
And
agree.
we've got to jump this gap because every year it gets worse.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
got to take some chances, which aren't really chances. We just got to, like Neil said, take some action.
Sure. A relatively new challenge that's facing resort communities across the nation and certainly is starting to have an effect here is the emergence of the short-term rentals and the VRBOs, the Airbnbs. John, do you have any thoughts on how the influx of those affects the long-term rental inventory?
I don't have any, it's all anecdotal at this point. I'm certain that it is not helping. And what's interesting is that given the fact that our real estate market in this valley still has not recovered to pre-recession levels, and the prices of for sale units is still substantially less than it was, the fact that we are having this crisis of affordable long-term rentals would probably speak to the fact that we have this new dynamic going on with owners renting their units instead of long-term, short-term. But at this point in this community, it's fairly anecdotal.
Right, but as you said, it's not helping matters.
It's hard to imagine that it could help.
About
exactly.
Is so low to start with. All right, panel, I'm going to ask for your help here. We're going to move into hopefully some solutions. The most successful affordable rental housing project, Northwood Place, was built in Ketchum in 2007. Why haven't we used this as a successful model? Neil, as chair of KCDC, you played a pivotal role in setting up that partnership that created Northwood Place. How did that public-private partnership come about, and can we duplicate something along those lines?
Well, thank you, Michael. I think every successful project, whether it's in Ketchum or countywide, and let's be really clear, I mean, housing is a countywide issue. It's a valley-wide issue. It's not a city issue.
Sure.
And so if we can, and so my answer to this is all about successful partnerships. It's partnering between nonprofits and government agencies. It's partnering between city administrators and city officials and county officials. I think when we talk about Larry's project that he mentioned earlier, if we have the successful partnership between the cities, between the city of Sun Valley, between the city of Ketchum, between the county, we can get this done. Because if we all go in with the attitude, we can get it done and we can start on it, that's a very strong place to be in.
Sure.
And so my view on successful projects is get going on it, get started, foster really good partnerships, and then tackle and then invite the community in to that discussion, because the community has great ideas. The community has great expertise. And if you encourage them to be part of the process, you'll still get some NIMBYism, but you will get a lot more buy-in to whatever is decided. So it starts.
On that note, John, you're on record at the Sun Valley Economic Development Forum stating that the reason we have made little to no progress of late is the lack of political will on the part of our community. How can we develop that political will, which then brings with it the power and the force to make something happen?
I think everyone here discussed the idea of educating the public. I behoove anyone to look at any of the subsidized or deed-restricted housing projects that have been built here in the last 10 years and identify those projects from regular market rate projects. There is virtually no difference. That's number one. Number two is, who are these people that we're talking about? There's a stigma associated with the word affordable housing, as if we're going to be housing completely indigent people who have no viable means for making a living.
Right.
That's not who we're talking about.
These are our fellow citizens.
We're talking about our fellow citizens, whether it's doctors, lawyers, school teachers, firemen, policemen, the people that come and service our homes. They're our neighbors. They're our friends. So that's part of the issue. But there is no one simple solution. Neil's project was done with tax credits, was it not?
Correct.
Yeah, there's definitely not one solution.
No, there's no silver bullet.
And we have severe limitations, as Commissioner Schoen pointed out, in what we are able to do in this community. So, for example, in Colorado, in certain communities, they actually voted to tax themselves with a transfer tax on the sale of real estate. That's part of the way that they've been able to build literally hundreds of units of affordable housing. So our ability to tax ourselves, our hands are relatively tied. We don't have home rule. Even though there might be a political will to do that here, it's not going to come up until our state legislature makes changes.
Sure.
Density, again, getting back to that subject, we need density, we need smaller dwelling units, but we have some of the highest building costs in the nation here. Why is that? It's not the materials, it's not the cost of getting them here, it's the cost of labor. And if you talk to any contractor today or subcontractor, they're having to pay their people more than they have ever paid in order to attract workers here, because every community is experiencing similar things. There's huge competition for labor. Whereas years ago, the Wood River Valley was always thought of as paying their people more money than surrounding communities.
Sure.
That's not the case anymore.
Well, and as we know, there is an opportunity to take one of the probably that biggest cost that you mentioned out of the equation to a large extent in Ketchum right now, and we're looking at putting together a public-private partnership that can be one of the strategies. But like you've mentioned, there needs to be numerous strategies, and I think there's the chance to do acquisition and rehab ones and twosies here. I spoke with a professor.
I mean, the only strategy not to do is to do another study.
Sure.
What we don't need is to study. we need to get doing rather than studying.
No, exactly. I spoke with a professor, a real estate professor from ASU, who's very familiar with our community yesterday, and he threw out a possible strategy of first and last month and deposit subsidies to renters and possibly even subsidies to market rate landlords for rents to incentivize and kind of push back a little bit against the short-term rental, the desire to maybe do a short-term rental if you could get a long-term. So, I think they're out there, and the existence of many obstacles is all the more reason that we have to then band together and create this political will. Larry, do you have some thoughts on that?
I'll just give you an example of where, I wrote some legislation that would give county commissioners in Idaho the ability to forgive property taxes for a defined term for defined projects, under the auspices of a local housing authority. There's only a few counties in Idaho that have that structure. I mean, have the housing authority and have the workforce housing problem, but the number of counties that is having that problem is growing.
Yeah.
The problem I ran into was it couldn't get the support of the majority of other counties, and if you want to get legislation passed, you need the support of your peers.
Blaine County can't do it all.
Right, Blaine County can't do it all on its own. But I'm just saying, forgiving property taxes isn't a long-term solution. It's a way to reduce the upfront costs, the sort of first year costs, first 5-7 years, whatever the term would be, costs to the developer as well as the initial buyer or renter. So reducing costs, the county has worked with the Advocates for Real Community Housing, another organization that is local, and has actually, under Idaho law, providing workforce housing is considered to be in the public interest. So the county made a public interest finding in a couple of cases, said donating this land to the housing authority, and the housing authority then partnering with ART, with the Advocates for Real Community Housing organization, has resulted in the creation of some community housing.
Yep.
But as somebody said earlier in this conversation, one house at a time. If that's what it takes, that's what we're going to do, and we're committed to it.
It is, but I do believe that this has reached a point when we need to also look at strategies that will move the needle.
No question.
Can I throw something out?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that Harry Griffith, my associate at SVED, is working on with the county is in the Gateway area, is trying to find a model of some zoning density changes that would do what John was talking about earlier, and Larry, about smaller lots, smaller homes, and having some kind of micro sewer system is one of the options that we're looking at, so that you could maybe have a pod, is what I call it. Other places in the areas of impact, thinking of that great area between Haley and Bellevue, or south of Bellevue, or the Gateway, where you could put a pod. If you think of maybe someplace like Gannett, or is it Clear Spring?
Cary?
No, not Cary, because no one wants
Spring
to live in
Creek.
Cary. Right. That area has their own sewer, right? They have a integrated sewer system and water system that they can use. So why can't we take this mini sewer, go to an area where it's dense, so it's not impacting areas around it, and then have these cottage-style smaller homes that are nicely designed.
I think what we all see here is we've got a lot of creative minds. We have a lot of expertise. And you know, to shed some hope maybe on this, we've also got some land that we can use. We can leverage the expertise in the land and the knowledge about what we can and can't do legally into some housing.
Right, but it starts with political will. If there's the political will and the political and our city leaders and our county leaders say we're determined to make this happen, I bet if they sent that message out to the community will come up with some really good, strong proposals.
Yep.
Right now, the community is not encouraged to come up with some solutions. Until we encourage the community, we're not going to see great solutions coming out of them. In fact, they're rather discouraged because of the lack of progress. So I think it starts at the top with the political will. I don't believe that there needs to be a lot of government subsidies, if any, but there can be a lot of creativity in setting the new ordinances in certain areas to encourage it. And so that's the message I would send to our political leaders.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you panelists and all of our guests for shedding light on this issue. Listening to you, I do strongly believe that solutions lie in maintaining and creating political will, working together, banding together to make this happen. We need to think creatively and act courageously. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you.
doing
Appreciate
this.
it. Thanks, Ion Sun Valley, for shining the light on this issue.
I'll just have some vacuum water.
Yeah, so now can we turn the lights off?
Eye on Sun Valley, daily local news from beautiful Sun Valley, Idaho.